And
Speaking of political targeting, it was announced, of course, that there's a whole group of people led by David Brock and others going after any lawyer that was connected to the Trump election challenge. Over 100 lawyers they said they're going to target. They're going to use the bar associations to do so. The bar associations, in my view, have been compromised for a long time. As Jerry Spence used to say, the gentlemen of the bar are governed by the gentlemen of the bar. And he meant that contemptuously in reference to the old British, and so the first example of that is the Texas bar is going after Sidney Powell and has filed a complaint in court for that process to be prosecuted. Now, I have I warned publicly every one of these people to stay away from the statements they were making. And I said that the outcome was going to be diversion from the real issues. Just the News had a report this week that showed that had signature match checks been employed, that the election would have been legitimately put to the Congress because it would have been in dispute in enough states governing the Electoral College. They detailed all the evidence that also had already been found by the Wisconsin former Supreme Court Justice's special counsel. But all that, of course, got buried because of the Dominion and Smartmatic stories that, especially the Smartmatic ones, but Dominion as well, which were just, some of them were just obviously false, provably false from the get-go. And it was a trap, and it was an obvious trap, and people like Sidney Powell wouldn't listen and kept marching on, and they're using all of those statements against her. And the ethical provisions are those provisions.
Well, so I'm not sure that I read what you sent me. Let me just make sure that I can explain what it was. It was the it's the disciplinary petition.
Yes.
The one
in Texas, they file in court. A lot of places, all this is kept private until it gets into court. We can talk about Alec Baldwin publishing his arbitration petition under JAMS rules, when JAMS rules usually prohibit that because it's supposed to be confidential. But we'll get to that later.
We're going to get there next. That'll be
in Texas, they file it in court. And so once they made a factual finding, they detail why they don't say what sanction they're seeking. But I think it was filed in Dallas County, because I think they file in the county, I guess, where your license is or where your domicile, which is interesting. That's different than a lot of other
Dallas
states.
County. So I got to take my glass. I'm an old man, Robert. I can't see without my glass. I can't read now at close range with my glasses on. So it's just a disciplinary action. It says she did badness in her practice in the context of 2 of the election lawsuits. But the allegation that I'm curious about, because this entire 5-pager comes down to this one allegation to me. It says, in the lawsuit styled Pearson versus Kemp, case number yada yada, filed by respondent in the Northern District of Georgia, respondent attached a certificate from the Secretary of State that she purported to the court was, quote, undated. The certificate was altered to remove the date, and respondent's statement that the certificate was undated was false. So that's the one of the 2 specific accusations.
The other ones are the Smartmatic statements, are the ones where she's going to have real trouble.
Well, on the one of the altering the documents, do you have any? Sorry, let me get that out of here.
There were several of those. I think her defense originally was that some of that was just a mistake or some things that fell through the cracks, and it was, they're on a rush timetable and that sort of thing happens. I think some of that she could get around. It's making repeated statements like the Smartmatic statements that are going to be the most problematic for her. And then that puts that other conduct in a different context. Yeah. And so my prediction is that Sidney Powell will likely be disbarred by Texas. And I think she's got an uphill battle to protect her license, depending on what judge she draws and how it goes up to the appellate process and the Texas Supreme Court. But I think that, and I said so at the time, I was like, these statements the bars are going to use, I don't agree with it, but it was clear that they were setting themselves up to be in harm's way. And it was similar to the Smartmatic suit. There was a lot of news about her being dismissed from the Smartmatic suit, but people didn't realize why. She was dismissed for personal jurisdiction reasons, not for any substantive reasons. Everybody else had their motion to dismiss denied, including Fox News, including Rudy Giuliani, including Lou Dobbs, including I can't pronounce her name, Maria Bartiromo. It's with a B. And I think there may have been one other. So and there was some really problematic language by that state court in New York. It basically implied that if you make a statement that the institutional experts disagree with, then you can be sued for libel. And this is, I kept telling people, The precedent they're trying to set with Alex Jones is going to spread. That disease, that virus is going to get out. And that's exactly what's happening. Because the only factual grounds to say that Fox and these other people made materially false statements that they knew to be false or in a reckless disregard for the truth, in other words, actual malice. One of the primary grounds for that was, election officials disagreed with you. It's like, what? That's not the grounds for actual malice.
No, but and that much I agree with. Where I read that allegation about her altering a date, the first question I ask is, why would the altering of the date have been material to the proceeding? And I don't know the context, and I don't know what she did. Like, if it's material relevance, and therefore that might explain the potential malice to altering or covering up a date, calling it undated, fine. If it's an issue of, like, I forget what lawsuit it was in, where we saw where they alleged that something had been modified, but it was because it was photocopied with a Post-it on it. And I think it was Michael Flynn.
Yeah, that was Flynn. The other issue she runs into is people filed declarations that they later said that they hadn't vouched for, that someone else had signed for. Also, that people had the famous one where the guy listed towns in Michigan, and he was actually looking at votes. He was looking at votes in Michigan and populations from Minnesota. Yeah. He got things flipped. It was going to guaranteed to be sloppy. And, that was one of my criticisms. I was like, one, this is a bad path. Avoid it. It's a trap. I forget what the meme is, it's a trap. It's a trap.
It's Star Wars.
I screamed that privately and then did it publicly, and they just didn't listen. And it's unfortunate. Now, I think it'll be misused and abused. I mean, here you have a guy like Mark Ellis, been sanctioned by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, probably involved in criminal activity related to Spygate, and you're not seeing any ethics board investigate him. And Kleinsmith plead to a felony, and the D.C. bar reinstated him as soon as his sentence was over. But watch Sidney Powell get treated differently, unfortunately, because I do not trust the Texas bar.
We'll see.
Both this case and the Smartmatic case had another problematic aspect. It said if you rely on an anonymous source and you don't tell people who the source is, then you too can be sued for libel or have a disciplinary action brought against you. That's going to make it very difficult to protect confidential sources.
The reality is that anonymity is free speech. Anonymity is free assembly. Anonymity is free expression. And forced by government or forced by government-backed corporation, exposure is the death of freedom. And fuck anyone who thinks different.
These licensing organizations are a threat to liberty. They always have been. And that's how they're being misused and abused. And we're going to witness it in live time in the Sidney Powell case.